Welcome to the King's Couch. I'm your host, Sulo King, and today I have a very special guest. I have Jerm Addams, a good dear friend of mine. He helped get the original SOMA on Union Street started in, what was that, 1989?
Yeah, late 89.
Yeah. And then
November.
Transferred over to Metro for a while before his successor, Jerry Brooks, took over. The both of them now host a really cool podcast show called Union and Metro, where they talk about the old days of SOMA. For those of you that aren't familiar with SOMA, SOMA was an all-ages venue here in San Diego, and it was around from 89 to...
It was actually...
It was before.
88 or so. And then in 2000, I believe, is when left Metro, and then Jerry and Scott from Blink opened up the one where it is now. And that was, God, I don't remember. Jerry would know.
It was like early 2000s.
Was it?
Yeah, it was like
2001, 2002?
2, I think. Yeah, something like that. And, you know, it's funny because I remember we talked about that when you had me on your podcast, about how I helped try to get the original location back, the second location,
right?
The one in Metro. And, you know, I met Jerry through working at Cane's, and he came down there, and we had a mutual friend named Jessica who, you know, introduced us at a party. And Jerry and I hit it off, and, you know, I really respected what he did at SOMA and everything. And SOMA was such a huge, you know, part of my, you know, youth. Mm-hmm. And it made me realize what I wanted to do. And at that point, I was just starting my career in the music business.
Yeah.
So he's like, hey, let's try to get SOMA back. Len wants to get it back, but I'm up in Oxnard. You know, can you be my liaison in San Diego? So I went into the flower shop that it is.
Yeah.
And saw, you know, like, because I heard that he told me the building owner owned the whole property there.
Yeah.
So I went in and, you know, talked to someone there, and, you know, just kind of asked around. I was like, hey, do you know if they're leasing out the property next door or what they're going to do? And he kind of just gave me a definitive answer. I don't know if that was the owner I was talking to or what. He's like, yeah, they're not budging or anything. You know, they're kind of just going to do their own thing.
Yeah.
What they're doing now. And, you know, I reported that back to Jerry, and then I didn't really hear anything for a while. And then all of a sudden, you know, he tells me that SOMA's coming back, and we're going right next to the sports arena, taking over the Old Man 6 Theater, which I thought was a perfect building, great location for a new SOMA. And he even brought Len and surprised me while I was working at Cane's. Wow. You know, offered me a job. You already know how that story goes. Yeah. Didn't turn out so well for me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I already had the job at Brick by Brick, and I was happy there. And I realized that, you know, a 21 and up market is there's more money in making that, and, you know, more possibilities in doing that, as much as I wanted to do all ages shows. But then I went on and I found the Jumping Turtle up in San Marcos, and I did that. But, you know, that was back then, a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know.
And the weird thing about all the transitioning too, is just how the scene was moving and manipulating and growing, you know, because in the 90s you had that big boom, and then, you know, I left in 97. So prior to me leaving, there was all the raves that they were doing. So then that was a big thing. And there was a lot of places to kind of run your own illegal sort of stuff, and then all the raves were doing that. SOMA was still a standard, but then the scene just started, you know, coming down. As the bands were getting bigger, it seemed like the scene started to separate even more, versus like now, where there's a ton of promoters and a ton of bars and breweries and all these places to play, and just seeing all the transitions through all the years is just, it's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really crazy.
It's great. Well, it's so much easier to be a promoter these days.
Yeah.
You know, back when I started, I was getting, you know, physical press kits in the mail, manila envelopes with a 8x10 promo pic from like the national artist, a CD, sometimes occasional cassette tape, but we were more prominent in the CD era, 2002 when I started booking. And then mp3.com became a thing because Napster was around in the late 90s, and so mp3s existed already. They weren't very prominent then, but then that transitioned into this MySpace community, and people started telling me that I needed to get on there, and I was like, why? And they're like, well, you can find bands on there. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
Because I would hunt bands off mp3.com before, and I was like, this is great. When I got on MySpace, you can, for a long time, they had a search radius. So you could put in your zip code and however, many miles radius that you wanted to search within. So I would keep it in a small circumference of San Diego, and I would hunt bands and find so many rad bands that way. And then they got rid of that feature for some reason. Which was really annoying. And then Facebook came along, and that wasn't really great for music just yet at that time.
Yeah.
But I watched how things progressed, and I watched how, even people handing out flyers were calling themselves promoters. So now it's just like any Tom, Dick, and Jerry can just go out there and call themselves a promoter and put on a show. It's even easier than it used to be back then.
Right.
Back then it was a little harder, to do that.
That just gave me chills thinking about it
because you didn't have like this access of Facebook event invites and
right.
I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword because there's a lot of powerful tools with social media, but then on the other hand, you have people that are so lazy. They think just promoting the show in a post once or twice, a week is going to be suffice. No,
right.
I personally message people. I respond to those messages personally.
Yeah,
I work hard.
Yeah,
with anything that I'm promoting because I need it to be in your face because it's oversaturated with so much content on there. I mean, here's a great example. Someone's like, you missed my birthday party. Didn't you get my event invite? I was like, no. Oh, really? Oh, I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, I have so many notifications on there, and I'm not always on social media.
Right.
Like everyone thinks I am. But that's how reliant people are in this day and age. A lot of them are.
It's the easy way out.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the thing that, when I was doing it, I still, to this day, don't quite understand the title sense because I had someone reach out to me and ask whether or not, through social media, on Instagram, it was, what do you say? Is this the Jerm that was the stage manager at SOMA? And I thought to myself, Jerm, the stage manager, are you talking about one of the other ones that are claiming that go by Jerm now at SOMA? Because I've heard there's other people. I've been confronted about it. Oh, I'm the freaking original. So I just replied with, yes, sir. And I had to look through his stuff to kind of figure out who it was, but I never considered myself a stage manager. I didn't even really consider myself a promoter. Len owned the club. I booked bands and promoted them, but I also cleaned the toilets. I also had to open and lock the place. By the time Metro, I was running the place so that Len could do whatever he did, and then he dealt with all the bigger acts and all that. And I still to this day, I'm proud of it. I was more focused in on the local stuff. But to put a title of anything, I looked up to Tim Mays.
Oh, yeah.
Tim Hall, Harlan, Bill Silva. Those guys were promoters. Len was, in my eyes, was more like the promoter. I was just the guy on the street doing everything from flyers to booking the bands, and I didn't really understand the sense of what I was doing because I was so into it until afterwards. And then as history is being rewritten and it's talked about, and I had left, Now I see it in a different way, but even like the people that I've tried to work with, it's the way that I work is so much different. You know, we've talked about this before, but you know, the way that, and you know, as we were saying earlier, if you're going to be a promoter, you can, you know, go on social media and you can do that for 15, 20 minutes since you're on there anyways, you know, most people, and you can promote things. But really the way that we did it, especially that I would have to do it, is flyers every event. We had those, you know, those little cards, and then we had the posters. So there was back then there was record stores you could take them to. Any place around schools, any telephone poles, putting up flyers on telephone poles, big shows at the sports arena, like the time that I saw Brian Warner, when he was barely Marilyn Manson, was doing the 9 Inch Nails, and he was on the payphone. You know, back then I had a pager eventually, but I would have to call a voicemail. So low budge. I did a lot of promotions off of a payphone, but when I seen Manson there, I was going to go up to him and talk to him and see, you know, hey, you want to check out this club? We work at SOMA, because they're with an ex-girlfriend, and I was going to promote SOMA and see if we can get him to play. That's the way, you know, you have to be out on the street and doing all this stuff. And
how'd you meet him?
Eventually they just came through on a tour, and because by the time we were at Metro, Lynn had a bevy of other booking agents that would call him up, and he would claim that he had to get up at 7 a.m. while people like me were sleeping in till noon. Well, I was up till 4 or 5 in, so you know, I got to get some sleep, especially when I'm doing 14, 15-hour days. But so they would call him from like in New York and say, hey, we got this package, and we would try to figure out which package would work. And as you were saying, you know, I had milk crates of tapes from locals, and then they would send you a press pack. You know, tape, and then eventually CDs. So you got the glossy of the band, you got all the info, you got, you know, basically a press package, and then you look at it and you try to figure out where they might fit and what bands you might be able to do. Sometimes it was a crapshoot. Sometimes it was like, oh, so-and-so wants to come through. Oh, that's easy. Or like I'd be talking to someone and building a relationship for a few months, and then finally, like Keith Morris and Bug Lamp came through, and we treated him well, and Keith was good to me, and you know, everything worked. So eventually we got to do the circle jerks.
Rad.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot more work back then, and when I look at my old books, there's so many amazing shows and so many amazing local bands. But then once you get into the social media stuff, once we get into CDs, it started becoming a little bit, things were changing.
Yeah.
More money came into play. The big promoters, you know, Bill,
he moved to LA.
Tim, but then they would come in, they would use our venue. And it was like, wait a minute, you got your own gig, but you want to use this. So then there was the integrating, or whatever word I'm trying to use, of other using bigger venues to do their thing. And then we eventually were doing the sports arena shows.
Those were so fun, but such a lot of work and time and money and effort that went into those. But you know, I mean, I had such fond memories of those shows, and such a good time. Yeah. I'm always, you know, always, as long as I live, like look back on those times, spending the New Year's Eve shows, SOMA shows. You know, and it's interesting. I thought I could relive a lot of those memories going to the, you know, location it's been in for the last 20 years.
Right.
It doesn't even like hold a shadow to any of the, you know, I didn't go to the Union location. I was too young. By the time, you know, I started hanging out at SOMA, it had already been at Metro, like probably, what year did it open up over there?
I believe it was 94.
Yeah, it was brand new. I started going to SOMA in 94 because I was 14 years old.
Did you go to the Scottish Rite ones? We did.
I
think we
went to a
did
couple
3.
Scottish Rite shows. I would go to YMCA skate park. Had a event hall right there.
Yeah, Eddie did a couple shows there.
You know, I was so diehard into the punk scene back then. Like No Use for the Name was like the first pop punk band I picked up. Minor Threat was the first actual punk band I got into.
Yeah.
You know, and back then it was just kind of like recommendations from other people of what bands are cool. So that's when I started getting into punk. That was me getting out of like the whole rap phase of the 90s. You know, I mean, I still like listening to Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg every once in a while, but I wanted something that resonated more with me. And when I found punk, I was like, where have you been all my life?
Yeah.
You know, I always knew about it, and Sex Pistols and Ramones and shit like that. And my dad even listened to Ramones and turned me on to them.
Yeah.
And it was like my saving grace, because it was like made me realize what I could find as a creative outlet. And going to SOMA was a way for me to like stay out of trouble. And to this day, I think that Metro, you know, I can't compare it obviously to Union.
Right.
Was probably the raddest music venue ever. I mean,
yeah,
I loved just how free I felt when I went in there. Back then, you could smoke cigarettes, you could write on the walls.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like our CBGBs, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
you guys were always so welcoming, so cool. So you'd look out for us, you'd give us rides home when we needed them.
yeah,
You know, and it's cool to be able to be friends with you guys all these years later. You know, people that I looked up to, and you know, because of SOMA, I realized what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I talk a lot about this when I do like interviews, and even on this show, you know, every once in a while I'll talk about it. But music has always been my number one love and passion in life.
yeah,
Out of everything, you know, surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, you know, just anything.
yeah,
I can't think of anything else that compares to how music makes me feel.
yeah,
And how it can pick me up when I'm down or pissed off or whatever. You know, just, especially when you're in your car trying to decompress now as an adult.
yeah,
I have my Spotify on shuffle. And I love like the era we're in. We don't have to flip through different CDs. I was always known for making mix comps. That was my big thing. You know what I mean? I would even give them out as like personalized birthday gifts sometimes.
yeah.
Because I had so much fun doing that. But
Those were the best. I mean, that's in the early days. That's how you found out about bands. I still have one. I got in '85 or '86. No, it was probably '86, maybe '87, because I graduated in '86, and I was still living in Mira Mesa. So yeah, it would be '86 summer after graduating, and then had Minor Threat, Dicrusion. It might have Kraut and Black Flag, I believe. So 2 bands on each side, and it was just like not the whole album. It was just a good enough mix, and that opened up my eyes. I was already into Black Flag for sure, especially by then. But like Dicrusion, I'd never heard of them. Kraut, I remember one of my boards in the mid '80s. I'd heard enough of them, but it was another one of those things where a lot of the punk stuff I didn't know where to get. Because growing up in Mira Mesa, I started off in OB, Point Loma, and then we moved to Mira Mesa in '71. There wasn't very many punks. So, like, I remember hearing Blondie when I was, God, I don't know, 10, 11, something like that. So it was the late '70s. But I remember specifically being on the swing in the backyard, and my Tonka trucks out, my little transistor radio. So it's not much different than now.
Yeah.
But
That's rad.
and I remember hearing Blondie and being like, oh, I'm getting chills, being like, this is different. I'm digging this. And then sometime through junior high into high school, more things would like, Go-Go's would pop up, B-52s would pop, but then, one of the earliest ones was Dead Kennedys and of course Black Flag, but I was already into Black Sabbath and some metal stuff, which I still am to this day. But slowly I started getting more into the Arsenal. And by the time I ended up, so it was late 89 when I was booking shows at SOMA, and so I told this story many, many times, but the idea of booking bands and knowing what to do, I just knew that again, everything that I did, skateboarding, everything, the music was the most prominent thing.
Right.
So the idea to work in music and then be able to, the pretense was to go in as an artist. Little did I know that I'd be molded into being a booking agent of sorts. Again, the title is weird.
It is, I felt kind of weird saying that, but I didn't want to call myself a promoter either.
Yeah.
On my business card it said booking agent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I remember the feeling when I first got a business card, how rad that was.
Yeah.
Because it made me official at that point. And when you're 22 years old and you're running, a venue that's world renowned and respected, especially more in the underground world, which to me is a lot cooler than, running House of Blues or some shit.
Yeah.
No offense to House of Blues, but...
it's a bit more corporate.
So well, you get my point.
There is that divide.
Point. Yeah, there is that divide. Yeah, and it was a real gratifying feeling, and people take you a lot more serious when I came to find out real quick when you hand them a card.
Yeah.
But I came to realize how many people actually respected Brick by Brick. That's how I met, Nick Adler. That's how I met like all these different people that have been through there or, heard of the venue. And it was a great time, man. And, that, like I said earlier, and I always emphasize, is like that goes back to, the influence I had going to SOMA.
Yeah.
So that's so rad that you got to have that opportunity, because music now is not anywhere as cool as it used to be. We're in a weird time right now.
It is, yeah.
Because I love like the history of music, period, especially rock and roll. And now, in the current state of technology where we're at, it's so easy to make music even on your phone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I feel like the challenge of writing a song is not what it once was, because now we can create digital tracks to accompany us.
Right.
Before, where we'd have to like, okay, you play drums, you play bass, perfect. You play keys. But now, like, we don't even need any of that. We don't even need to play a damn instrument anymore. It's just a push of a button, a click of a mouse, and we're good. But, it's crazy, like being older and just kind of reflecting on my time and how, it was a real transitional time to what we're talking about with like social media and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then, being able to hear stories and reflect on like your experiences, because like, it was even harder and more organic to put together shows and create flyers, and there's a lot more effort that was involved, instead of just staring in front of a computer creating a flyer. But even when I first started out, like graphic arts wasn't to the point where it is now on a computer. Like I was in Kinko's making flyers and making cutouts inspired by old punk flyers and whatnot and stuff that I'd see in SOMA. But going back to like when we're talking about compilations, one thing I forgot to mention earlier that I just thought of was I loved the local band compilations. I mean, first time I even went to like London, for example, like this is how big of a fan of local compilations I was. I went to Tower Records there, found the local guy, that worked there, that knew the scene, because I asked personally. I was 19 years old, never forget it. First time in London, and my mom's like, "Where do you want to go?" I was like, "Drop me off at Tower." And I spent like an hour in there, and the guy was so stoked to meet someone, especially from California.
Yeah.
And as you guys have us beat out there, And I was like, what are you talking about? The UK has so much good music. I was like, you can't really compare the two. It's like apples and oranges. He's all, well, what can I do for you? And I was like, I want to find a local band compilation. And I was kind of bummed, and so was he. He's like, we didn't really have much to offer. I was like, what?
Wow.
And this is 1999, right? And he gave me one CD that they had. And it was mostly, he's like, may not really be too into it. It's emo indie. And I was like, because that was on the rise. That was like,
right.
You know, emo was like the precursor to indie rock and the whole hipster scene.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I saw that CD buried around somewhere, and then the bands weren't bad, but it really wasn't my cup of tea. And, you know, my whole point of what I'm trying to get across is like, I mean, we had like Rob's Comp, the MTV's Most Unwanted compilations, Volume 1 and 2 were awesome. And
There's the
Pete's
yellow
Comp.
Yeah, Pete's Comp.
Yeah, everyone was like, you know, had their name and just called it blah, blah, blah comp. Other
Lump
than
of
like,
Coal by Yellow Records.
yeah.
Shout out Jeff for that. Yeah, but there is, if you think about, there is, well, that goes back, which is funny because
Because you don't see that really anymore.
I know, unless it's,
You know, Slaboratory is the last promotional company I've seen have an attempt at doing that. And they did a great job, but it doesn't have the lasting effect that it did now because
Right.
you want to know why? Playlists on Spotify.
Yeah.
And not even that is popularized like it used to be, you know?
there's something, it was like, I have a bunch of Mystic Records comps, and then there's also like the Teen Idols SOA comp, and you know, and vinyl back. I like the fact that vinyl is coming back,
Me too.
but like, you know, my truck doesn't play vinyl, so I have to play CDs, and I don't have all the Bluetooth and all that crap, and I barely even know how to work that.
All good.
So, you know, I'm going through my old CDs and I'm playing, but you know, they're scratched and the art on it pretty much just sucks because it's so small, and I need my reading glasses to read, you know. But when you had, in the early days when I was starting to do it and everything was all fresh and new, granted technology helps push us a lot further,
yeah.
but there's something more organic about, like with you going to Sun Studios and doing your record, there's something about the process. It's not always the end result. It's all the little steps that make it have lasting, you know, memories and also credibility in the long run. If you put in that work and do it more organically, one step at a time, instead of just pushing buttons. Like you're bringing up making flyers. I remember, God, how we did. So I ended up moving out to Santee, and that's when in '89, I believe. No, I was already out there. So must have been about '87, because I started doing SOMA when I was 21. So '87-ish, and I was living at my dad's. I had a camper in his garage, and that's where the whole SOMA thing starts with 424 Wieners, and that's all. Me and the short-lived guys, and then, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I would sit, my dad always had tea, iced tea. So I'd put, you know, 4 or 5 cups or spoonfuls of sugar in a big old glass of iced tea. And I'd sit there with my scissors and my razor blade and glue and make all these flyers. They had to cut out each letter, and to us, it was part of the process of making it. Granted, now you can go on a computer and boop, 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 and do that, and then you can share files. But to me, putting all that work and energy into it kind of had more feeling, and so when you're out there passing, it's like, yeah, I made this.
It's more personalized.
There's all these bands, and you actually talk to someone, you have to convince them. You know, you don't go up and go, look, I know you're into Poison, but this band here called Blasphemy is much better, and they're a metal band and they're from here, so bring a girl, drink a beer in the parking lot, come and see this show. Or I don't know if you've heard of them, they're a band called The Ninth. You should really check them out, they're really good. And then someone will go, you haven't, oh man, I have to introduce you. Oh yeah. They started, but I'll get into The Ninth in a minute. But so you're trying to convince, like I would be trying to convince someone. You know, the Ninth is playing with, I'm trying to remember, I believe it is Short-Lived, Mass Confusion. I don't remember. I have the flyer in my head because, you know, I used to make these flyers. I still have a lot of the early stuff of early flyer material. And you go to Kinko's, and if you find something cool in National Geographic or something, or like Crass, I mean, that Crass art, or John Yates that did a lot of the Dead Kennedy stuff, it's all clip art. You know, I know there's a ton of other artists, but you know, you put all your passion into making the flyer because you're part of the show, or for me, because I booked the show, and I want people to show up, not because I had somehow got, you know, infiltrated SOMA and this guy is paying for this venue and I'm able to put on punk rock shows. I just want to do it for the scene, for the bands, because if you're in a band, you don't want to go and play an empty venue, and you don't want to be playing, you know, in front of the bartender, which I've been to shows at the Casbah before where it's the bartender.
I played shows like that.
And even Tim leaves and it's like...
I did a tour that was like that. Like when we got all the way up to Oakland, and we're playing in front of the bands we played with and the staff. And I'm like, you know, it's a frustrating feeling. I'm, you know, pretty easygoing about stuff like that because you can't win them all.
Right.
But it's like when you're busting your ass promoting a show, whether it's local or whether you're on the road, like it's kind of a letdown when you get on stage and there's no one to see you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
I remember one time, like we played at what was it, like Alex's bar in Long Beach, and the bartender comes up to us. She's like, "You guys are too good to be playing on a show like this." I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You guys need to get on, like, you know, a national show, you know, or something like that." I was like, "That's what we do in San Diego." And they're like, "Then why are you up here?" I was like, "Well, you know, someone threw me a bone." And I'll never forget that night because the promoter like totally stiffed me.
Yeah.
You know, and I had rented a band, and you know, it's frustrating. Like, you know, it's like my ex always says, she's like, "Why do you still pay to be in a band? There's no money in it."
Yeah.
But you know what? When you're passionate, and I looked at her, and I like I always say, and I was like, you know what? You're passionate about something. You put money into that passion.
Right.
And you don't look at it that way.
Yeah.
As a loss.
Yeah. That's the skateboard company. That's the, you know, the charity I did. That's anything you're passionate about. I mean, you can just wing it. And I was going to bash again technology, so I will. You know, you could just wing it and you know, do whatever, like do a post on whatever social media. Hey, we're playing this show. Boom, there. Now all my 3,000 followers are going to see it. Well, good for you for having 3,000 followers or having 300,000, but the lack of effort you put into something is going to show in the end result. So us being passionate about, you know, like I never booked myself. Well, I don't remember the story exactly. I'd have to look through my notes, but when we opened up for Fear on the main stage, we opened the show.
Which band was this?
Pour.
Okay.
P-O-U-R.
Because you've been in so many bands.
I know. I know. And it was funny, out of the one band where it was the biggest, it was so Cockroach, when I did, well, let me finish the Fear show, I didn't really want to play the main stage because I had to still run the show. I had to run the stage. You know, still, I have to do things. But if I'm going to play, then I'm going to drink. So Len was, as you know, gracious enough to let me go and sit in my car, and I drank a couple 40s before we went on. So when I went on, I was, you know,
you were lit.
I'm here. You guys, I'm going to fucking destroy this place. And so we opened up, and I remember Lee was really excited. Lee Ving was really excited with us. Skate Nigs played with us, and Psychic Zoo. It was an amazing show. Amazing show. But like by the time I ended up doing Cockroach, that was because there was so much pop punk going around, and I'm not a pop punk guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I can appreciate a lot of it, but to me, my version of punk rock is the old version of, it's not just a hashtag, it's just kind of a way of life, it's a rebellion, but it's also an art thing, an extreme art thing. And you remember my mohawk and my fuck shirt, and it's funny, I'm wearing my fuck socks. And then I would always wear bondage pants and creepers and all that.
Yeah.
So it was my way of saying, screw pop punk. We're, the anti-pop punk. We're basically anti-everything, but with all the structure of pop punk. So we're part of you, but we're showing you it was my way of saying an F you, but I'm still totally supportive of you.
Yep.
Because I've always been, and I didn't like putting myself on a pedestal, but then again with my art, I kind of inadvertently do that anyways. So, and that's the band that most people remember, and even Colin had mentioned the guitarist. No, he was doing the drums in that band. He's from Dodgeball and does Pentagrams and Daisies with his wife Monica, who was also in Dodgeball.
Oh yeah, you had them on your show. I remember that episode.
Yeah, and
we would talk about doing the whole Dodgeball reunion. They were into that idea.
Yeah.
Which eventually we got to have that conversation again.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great.
Because I was trying to get Kill Me Kate back together, and then we all get sidetracked by life.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But we need to go back to that and eventually do that, because I think that'd be so much fun doing a show kind of like what Rob Perlman did.
Yeah.
But not just one show, like doing a show once or twice a year or 3 times a year, whatever. That'd be a lot of fun.
And stack them, and then
and then you could have the podcast show and interview all these guys at the venue.
Yeah.
I think Casbah is a perfect place to do that, because they have that whole back area for you to do that.
And that's where Tim Piles does his, right? Mm-hmm.
That's where I got the idea from. And I've also done interviews, or I did a interview for San Diego Punk. They had like a interview series, and it was like video too. Like they'd sit there and interview my buddy Mitch. He was in that band Fishing for Chips. They didn't really do a whole lot in San Diego, and then he eventually moved up, I think like Orange County or whatever, and he works for like Punk in the Park, and I just saw him at like Punk Rock Bowling, and like that's the No Effects tours and stuff like that. Yeah. But anyways, that would be a perfect setting in their back lounge to set up, and maybe even do something live would be cool. Something we haven't done yet.
That we were trying to do that. We did the live for the Union Metro podcast. We tried doing the one.
You went on site to like a brewery to do it. Yeah, I remember that.
And where we were was cool. I mean, everything was really cool and well set up, and it was a good experience, but never do it that way again, because the sound bleed. There's certain things to do a proper podcast, as that you need for sound quality, for if you're going to be doing any video, which we haven't quite dived into with ours. I was trying to get these kids to help me do all this stuff, but because we do at my house, and I still have the idea of being able to do a jam as well, and keeping the ideas flowing helps keep each new one more and more spontaneous. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I'm finding with doing the podcast and with sharing these memories, like I was saying with Colin, he gets approached about Cockroach, and when he gets approached about it, the admiration that he gets, he's like, it's crazy. I'm getting chills again, because we're put on such a pedestal of, oh my God, that band was, whatever, XYZ. And I appreciate it because in a sense, it was the joke band, yet it had the most passion to it, and to still be recognized for that out of all the projects that I've done. Usually, like if I bring up a band, go through the band names, Cockroach, Poor, Cockroach, Tribe of Fallen Dreams, I get to where there's really obscure ones, but the ones that always pop out, I'll hit Meat, and then I'll go urine, and then the eyes. Why the fuck would you name a band Urine? And I go, well, we had our demo tapes were urine samples.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that also on the Jason Navarro episode. Yeah.
So
that's funny that you mentioned that.
It
Because I
has
literally just
longevity.
finished listening to that episode a couple days ago, so it's still fresh in my mind. And so a couple things that you're talking about like made me think of that episode.
Yeah. And Jason was great. I mean, I
met
had to
him
do
once
some research.
when he played Soda Bar with
Oh, okay.
Suicide Machines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Jerry was down there running the merch and introduced me to, and he's such a down-to-earth, nice guy. Like you can just tell when you meet somebody before they even speak. Like just energetically. I was like, wow, this guy is going to be fucking cool as all hell, and he definitely was. And I wish I could have been there to sit on the couch like your buddy that was in the background.
Oh, that was Craig from Buck 09.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Craig.
See, that's the thing that I think we want to do more of, because like when Jason came in, I looked at him like, first I had to do research because I didn't really remember. And then I'd hear a lot about, that's why we talked a lot about skateboarding on that podcast. It was the Tony Hawk thing. So I asked my brothers-in-law about it to get some more info so I'm not completely blind. Like we have an interview coming up soon with Roy, I can't remember his last name, but he's from Downset, and he did something with Cypress Hill for a while, and someone else I can't remember. So I try to do some research so I'm not completely blind when I go into these. But like, when we had Cliff come in, I finally got to meet Tim Piles for the first time actually in person.
Was that really your first time meeting him?
Yep.
Wow.
Which is crazy because I've known about him for years.
And I'm stoked that you had him on the show too. Like, was that your idea, Jerry's idea?
It was my idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
it just, what I like about it is to be able to share the stories, and when certain people come in, you're just like, holy shit. It either it works and you just get through the interview. Luckily, we've had nothing but we just get in, we sit down, and we just flow.
Yeah.
Because there's so much to talk about and there's so many stories, but if you go in with, kind of a preconceived idea of how it's going to go, for me, that would just screw it up. I like
that's
everything
why I always
really
like to do things organically. I mean, the only kind of structured thing I do, which we'll get into in a second, and I usually do earlier in the interview, is I like to go back to the beginning of somebody and how they had their early influence.
Yeah.
And actually, that's probably a good segue to go that route right now.
Yeah.
With you. Because
So
I want to
deep
know
dive.
like how you became the person you are today. So what I like to do is work our way slowly up. So like what were your early like musical influences? And then talk a little bit about that, like what got you into skateboarding. And then eventually I'd love to hear the story of how you ended up, finding SOMA and going to SOMA and getting the job at SOMA.
Okay.
Because I don't think you've kind of briefly talked about it before on your show.
Yeah.
But I want to know a little more in depth of how that happened. That's why I wanted to invite you on here.
Yeah.
Because, I listened to your show and I was a fan before we even met of it. And when it was, a little more produced.
Oh. Overly produced.
It was cool. It was cool. I mean, but the episodes were so short. Just when it's starting to get good, it's like, oh, episode's over. But now, we're doing, even with my show, like, I do at least a minimum of 45 minutes, if not an hour.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll have episodes that go, 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever.
We did what? Just over 2 hours with you on ours?
Yeah, something like that. Jason's episode was like 2 hours and almost 2.5 hours, something like that. Yeah, but that's cool. I mean, it's kind of hard to gauge like people's attention spans.
Right. Well, that's
but if
funny,
conversation's interesting, someone's going to sit there and want to listen to the whole thing.
Right.
And the thing I like about podcasts, especially with your show, is it gives me something to do when I'm in my car. Because it's the only time I really listen to music, or when I'm at the gym, and it's so fascinating to hear all these stories and different perspectives from different people. That's why I want to hear your perspective now. Like how did you Like, what were your early musical influences growing up? And what got you into skateboarding? And let's start there and then work our way up on how you discovered SOMA.
So skateboarding to me, now the funny, because it's the first thing. The story has changed. My mom first told me when we were still in Point Loma, so I was about 3, that I had a skateboard. Who knows? It's just one of those things. You get a hula hoop, you get a yo-yo, you have skateboard, and so that was.
You grew up here in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, OB, Point Loma, and then moved to Mira Mesa, and then I moved out to Santee.
Born and raised in San Diego?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so she first said 3, and then later she's like, no, you were 5, so we would have been in Mira Mesa. And I do remember one of the first early skateboards in my memory, because my memory is pretty much shot, was the red one, and I have a couple at the house. I don't think it was a GT. I can't remember the name, but it's just the red plastic with urethane wheels, and I believe there'd be loose bearings back then, because that would be 73. And if 71, then it would have been probably a loose bearing, clay wheeled, some of the stuff that I collect. But so sometime in there, 3 to 5 is when it started. But I do remember by the time we moved in Mira Mesa, I ended up leaving there in '86. So it must have been, I always had a skateboard. I mean, I always remember having a skateboard. Of course I had a bike, but a skateboard would last longer, less problems, no flat tires. Not as easy to steal because it's always under my arm. And it just kind of grew to, I would say, I do remember not being able to ride it to the middle school, junior high. Because when junior high was far, far away. So I know I was riding pretty heavily from 6th grade on. So, all through the late 70s, early 80s, it was just always there, and it was just the fun thing. And not many kids rode them, so that always kind of be my go-to. I remember the earliest days of riding up to a curb, and mind you, we did not have money growing up. So, and the mortgage of the house was barely anything. Parents were still together back then. So some of the earliest memories I remember, you would do like the gorilla grip, where we would ride them barefoot, right? And you could just put your toes over the nose and the tail and just kind of hop. But to get up a curb, because there wasn't curb cuts everywhere, only for driveways. So to come up a curb, because the whitewash, there'd be the asphalt and of course, the concrete between. So you can jump down, cruise, and mind you, loose ball bearings weren't that good. So you get up to the curb and you just kind of kicktail it, get up, push on your nose, and then you can keep going. Remember the earliest days of figuring out you can kind of pop and you can do it kind of quick, and then eventually that just turned into an ollie. Mind you, through the rest of the world, basically, everyone was learning the ollie at the same time. And just the earliest memories of being one of the very few kids on a skateboard to me was just kind of what made the fabric of who I was. And then for music, like I was saying earlier, I remember being on a swing set, little transistor radio, and hearing Blondie. And before that, there's like the Eagles being played at the house. I'm trying to think of the vinyl my parents had. So the Eagles, my dad, a little bit of country, but they weren't, my mom was, Elvis, a little bit of Rolling Stones. They weren't really, neither were really into music per se. So it was kind of just our thing. My mom would always play whatever, I think back then it was 13K, and then I remember the Mighty 690 radio station. So there'd be, whatever pop crap. Blondie could kind of infiltrate a little bit. A lot of just the really elevator type rock and roll music. And so Blondie opened up my eyes, and then Dead Kennedys, and eventually Black Flag. So I would say probably by 80, there was other kids who had vinyl. I think it was my little brother that started collecting as well, but like one of my first records was Rush, Moving Pictures. I remember some Black Sabbath in the mix. The first vinyl I bought myself, I believe, was The Damaged by Black Flag. And something about, the darker stuff like Black Sabbath, I'm just drawn, being born on Halloween, drawn to that. And then punk rock, just the aggressiveness, the tone down, the simplicity but intensity really drew me in. And it was close enough in age to where I could relate to a lot of it. And as we were growing up, I went to Mira Mesa High. By Mira Mesa High, I was already way into art. My skateboard was always there. So it's just music, and I even took guitar class in, I believe it was 10th grade. And I got a D in that class because I didn't want to do all the notes. I didn't want to read music. I wanted to make noise. And it's funny that I ended up being a bass player later, and I still can't play the guitar worth crap. But it just kind of, by the 80s, it just, especially in Mira Mesa, the punk scene was small, the metal scene was big. It just started growing. There was that whole satanic wave, Satanic Panic, where everyone was all worried. Anton Xander's LaVey's books came out. I remember there's a kid called Shadow Cat. He had a big black mohawk, but he was more like a goth sort of punk. And to me, the mohawk never really resonated with his character. He seemed more goth, like Grisham, Jack.
Yeah.
That's what he the trench coat sort of thing. But then there's a couple other punks that I knew from graphics arts class. One reminded me of Johnny Rotten, and one reminded me of Sid Vicious. And then I was just, red, kind of longish hair. Obviously no tattoos, but that's sometime, I think it was 9th grade, because Shadow Cat had an earring. I had, let me think, back then, yeah, you could do the left ear, but if you did the right ear, then you were gay.
I remember that.
Yeah. So I didn't get my right ear pierced until I was probably 19.
Yeah, I started with my left and then eventually did both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Shadow Cat had the one, and I remember for some reason my sister and my mom, the older of the two sisters, didn't even have their ears pierced. But I had one, and then I did another one. And this might be a memory just to kind of make myself seem cool, but I remember Shadow Cat and I were kind of competing. So he eventually was kicked out of school for whatever. Or maybe he just had to conform, because back then conforming was really a big thing. I mean, this is, the early 80s. And I had 3 earrings. And I mean, you just take a safety pin or a self-piercing and you just put it through. And I found that it was fine, it didn't bug me. Use Kool-Aid or markers to put color in your hair. Use Sun-In to bleach your hair.
I colored my hair with a marker completely once.
Yeah. I did that.
My friend was bored and we were in class and she just sat there with a magic marker.
That's right. Remember Sun-In? The stuff you could put, because living in Mira Mesa, and I didn't even realize, this is so funny, I never really related to the surfers in Mira Mesa at all, or the surf culture. I was, skateboards. I liked going in the canyon. I liked spending time by myself and put on a little Walkman eventually whenever got one of those. But my whole thing was to skateboards, because when you fall on the ground, you know, you get hurt and you get up again and you dust off and you just go. It's just, it seems, you know, seems ridiculous now, but as a skateboarder, any skateboarder knows. And so the surfers, to me, even though it's from OB originally, I never could really relate to. So my whole thing was micro focused in on skateboards, and eventually in the 80s we started to have a crew, and we would skate around the Mira Mesa Mall. At one point, mid 80s, there was a friend of mine, Rick Haro. So yeah, this would be, I believe, 85. A friend of mine down my street was a cul-de-sac, and then there was a canyon, and he had gotten a Haro ramp. I don't remember what his connection was, because he was big into BMX. He was really, really good. He rode at City Streets SeaWorld. Oh,
I love City Streets.
That was with like Primo and his
such
Desiree,
a fun attraction there.
Yeah. I'll get to that in a minute. It's funny. So we had the ramp there, and someone out there in the world has pictures of us riding the ramp, and Rick and I would do doubles. So I would go up, and I prefer backside. I always skate backside. I would go up and I'd do one wheelers, and I'd catch a little bit of air on that. It was an 8-foot quarter pipe, and he would air over. So it was an 8x8, and it was out there for a while until, I don't know, probably cops or something said, you know, you can't have any fun. So because of that, Rick got me into, I was going to ride at SeaWorld, and I remember going there with him, looking at everything. It's like, this is the backstage, this is the area that we would be using. We had this whole routine. Unfortunately, at the time, I was getting way too into doing drugs, and I just kind of fucked everything off. After I graduated high school, it just kind of went down, and I dropped my sponsors and just dropped everything. And then that's when I ended up moving out to Santee with my dad. And that was mainly to get clean and get my shit together. So I was out there in Santee. This is funny, because when I moved out there, I would always bleach my hair white or blonde, but I had a big chunk, and I called it my Lita Ford chunk. It was a big chunk of black hair on the side. Lita Ford had done that for a while. And so it'd be out there in Santee skating around, and I eventually got a job doing landscaping. I just skimmed through everything to get to the good nuts and bolts. I did landscaping for the bit, you know, and then ended up, I ended up working for someone else, but then I had slipped, and that's when I knew, you know, I can't be doing drugs, you know, and I never really drank ever. And I'm like, I can't do this. So I was 20, and ended up getting a job at, at Wiener Schnitzel. And that's where I met Ray Cam from Short Lived, Chris Fields, who ended up being in Short Lived, but Chris has been in the, you know, the Dwarves, John Cougar concentration camp, still does that. There's a ton of other bands. So then I get a shout out Jeff and Sam, that are brothers. Sam and I did Deathiosaurus. We did the one album as Deathiosaurus. Who else was there? So Dennis B., who was a guitarist for Short Lived, Davey, the singer, Short Lived. There's a few other people that we had met, and because of them, we found out about the band called The Ninth.
Oh, okay.
The Ninth had a place called The Cave in Spring Valley.
Well, you talked about this on one of your episodes on Metro.
Where Eddie Vedder.
Yeah, that's
why
right.
I think he still hates me.
Yeah.
Or he just doesn't want to answer my DMs because he's a rock star and...
Wasn't that a Jason Navarro episode too?
It probably was.
I keep referencing that damn episode.
So, you know, because of The Ninth and all that, that whole scene, we started to grow together. And then eventually Chris Fields and I got fired from Wiener Schnitzel. We were just fucking off. It was obvious that it was coming to an end anyways. And so I ended up, at that point, I'd already moved out from my dad's, and I wasn't back in OB yet, but Ray Cam was working at Gamma Gamma
Okay.
in El Cajon. Lynn back then, would go around with flyers and stuff. And Boogie, here's the air show going on over there.
Yeah, and air show.
So Lynn was looking for an artist. They had the dance club, but they also had the dungeon. This is at the Union Street, 555 Union. So he was looking for another artist, and Ray's like, well, hey, Jerm, our friend, he works with us. I was working with Short-Lived, a band called Missing Children, a band called Psychic Dykes, and they were a trip. A Wayne County of sorts, and they're freaking amazing. And not Short-Lived, Struggle, Justin Pearson's band. So, and then as we were talking earlier on the phone, I ended up booking his first show as Struggle, and he talked about that on a podcast. We still talk, so shout out Justin. What's up, homie? Hey, Becky. So I ended up going under the pretense of, and I think it was John that was doing the club then. I believe it was called Mania. So upstairs would be a dance club, and they would do like goth, industrial, and then downstairs it was still open, but then it's like I got the bottom, we call it the dungeon, and because I knew the ninth, he wanted me to book them, so I ended up just getting my foot in the door. I booked the show. I didn't even show up at the show. I booked the show, and I stayed at home because I didn't have a ride. I didn't have a car for years. And then booked that show down there. I would have to look at my books and see what it was, because I'd already done, like, I did Struggle's first show in Ramona. Short-Lived played that, I believe, and I'm trying to think. Eventually that's where I would meet up with like Unwritten Law, Puzzle Box, and so it went well. Len didn't pay me anything, so that was even better for him. And I'm like, dude, I'm just a fucking punk rocker, and you got this building, and you're letting me book these bands.
You were just stoked to have thrown a show.
I'm like, fuck yeah, this is anarchy. This is brilliant.
That's how I felt when I first threw my first show at Brick by Brick.
Yeah.
I just felt stoked to have had the opportunity of a lifetime. Something I always wanted to do, being inspired from the SOMA days.
That's awesome.
As a teenager.
Yeah.
And I share that same sentiment as you, man. You didn't care. You were just stoked that you got to be able to do something that radical.
Yeah. Yeah, because, before that, the idea that got me into doing it, there's so many people that could shout out, but we don't have enough time, and they know who they are, and if they don't, well, then shoot me a text. Come on. You know how to fucking find me. Who doesn't know how to find me? I'm in the same freaking house. But I was going to do a comp called Other Side. And it was, so my company was Other Side Productions. I didn't have a license or anything. I didn't even know about it. I didn't care. I still rode skateboards. I worked at Wienerson's and got fired because I was a jackass. And they tried to make me a manager, but I'm like, I'm not, and I always seem to go to green for my mohawk. I'm like, I'm not going to wear a white suit and a stupid little frickin' tie with my mohawk. No, I don't. I'm not wearing a monkey suit. So that's because I remember this big long talk. One of these days I'll have the guys from Short-Lived come on, because we got to tell the Wiener Schnitzel. That could be a whole podcast of us just talking about that.
That'd be rad.
All these punkers at frickin' Santee Wiener Schnitzel. And that's really seriously the core, the nebula of what SOMA came to be. Because if I didn't know all those guys, and if I wasn't trying to do this comp, the first band I talked to about being on the comp was Deadbolt. Shout out, especially, Deadbolt, scariest band in the world. Icons. Legendary. Absolutely. I freaking love those guys to death. And then there was the Cowpunks, and there was a band called Cranial Vacancy. So I had already kind of found some bands. Like I was able to book Funeral March's last show.
Oh, okay.
Which my wife still talks about to this day. I wish they would compare. There's another band, I guess, using their name, Funeral March SD or 619 or something. So, excuse me. So, you know, I did that show. I ended up doing another show there where I booked it and again didn't show up. So eventually, somehow I got a ride from Santee, or I remember a couple times I took the trolley. So I'd be going through downtown San Diego. And I know I was 21 by this time, because I remember stopping into a bar because it's so early, because I didn't know what time to get to SOMA. I didn't realize how late Landon got there, and I didn't understand the workings.
Right.
You know, this is afternoon, I'm in downtown, punk rocker, 21, in shitty downtown, at a shitty bar. Everyone's looking at me like, and I'm going, fuck, this is my life. Oh well, I'm a punk rocker, you know, I'm used to having shit. I was used to having jocks chase me when I was really young, so.
Yeah.
These are just older jocks, but they're all drunk, so they run slower. Not a big deal, right?
Right.
So then I would start going to SOMA. Eventually I started getting paid, I mean, minimal. I didn't really graduate that much, to be honest. But it just became it became who I was, realistically. I found myself, I was making the flyers, I was booking the bands. To me, there was a science to it. As I grew, as I got older, and then eventually Sydney, he one day said, you know what, you need to move out of here. You move in with Kelly and I'm going to move you back to OB. So I moved back to Brighton. And on Brighton and being back in OB is when, so my wife's restaurant, the family restaurant, Cucina Fresca, was down there. And so the person doing their paperwork is actually Will, who ended up being the light guy at SOMA, and still a dear friend of mine. His mom did the paperwork, so she knew him, she knew Silas, who ended up being the door guy, who I ended up living with. And by the time I ended up living with him, this is the good part when it really starts making sense is, so we would get these tapes. Eventually I had a pager. I was able to get a pager, so someone would page me, and then I'd go to a phone and get the voicemail. Len had his brick phone, you know, he was, you know, but he also had his Porsche and he had his own place because, you know, he's older. He's established.
Yeah.
And I'm just some dumb kid. So I put everything, I mean, I still rode my board, but I didn't have sponsors anymore. That was who I was, right? So Silas and I would get these tapes and everything was written down. I have all my notes. So I'd write, say, you know, short-lived, struggle, and then I'd go for other bands and, you know, from the tapes, and we listen to them, try to figure out who they might work with, but then there was like, what part of town? Do they have a skinhead following? Do they have a jock following? Do a bunch of girls really like them? How big are they on their scene? There's all these little formula points they would try to figure out to try to book the best show to give everyone the best exposure and try to create a scene. I had no influence from anyone on doing any of this crap. Any of it. So everything I did was just, you know, by learning and failing, basically.
It's all trial and error.
If I failed bad, Len would let me know. But then when I got a little bit of cash for actually doing all this work, and by this time, mind you, when I was in OB, I remember when Sid said that I need to move to OB and get the hell out of Santee. I had just gotten an opportunity to work at Jack in the Box, which is funny because V, my wife, used to go and open up. She was the one that would go to a new location and teach everyone how to open up the store.
Oh, wow.
So she might have actually been running this one because it's fairly new in Santee. And I'm like, no. I remember telling my dad, yeah, I got an opportunity to work at Jack in the Box, but Sid wants me to move to OB, so I'm going to move to OB. All right, well, good luck. You know? Another one's out of my house. And at that time, actually, I graduated from a camper in the garage.
You have siblings?
What's that?
You have siblings?
Yeah.
How many siblings do you have?
Oh, boy. So, the youngest, rest in peace, is Trevor. He would be turning like 32 this year, 32 or 33.
Away.
Yeah.
Well, that's significantly younger than you.
Oh, yeah. That was from my mom's second husband.
Okay.
And then I have a stepbrother and a stepsister from my dad when he remarried years and years ago. And but I don't talk to them at all. I haven't for many years. And then there's my sister Roxy, who's let's start. So there's me, but I'm adopted, and then my parents were able to have kids. So there's me, and I'm 27. What's the cool age when you get old that you just start saying, yeah, 27, I think is. I'm actually
something like that.
I'm turning 55. So then my sister's 53, brother's turning 51. So then the other sister must be turning 46, I believe. In October, my brother in November, sister in February, and me in October. And they're all, well, the one sister's up in Menifee, but we're all, fairly local.
Yeah. And you say you're adopted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm redhead. I'm, redheaded stepchild, and, born on Halloween.
Right.
Did
you ever know your parents or
I know
your biological parents?
I know my birth given name. I know that they were both medical students. And I know that I'm on a couple registries and have been for years for them, so we can reconnect. And between you and I and the rest of the world, fuck them. They don't want anything to do with me. And at a point, I was kind of...
But you tried at least, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's, that I have a set of twin cousins. Same thing. You know how they found their parents? Or their mom, at least? Sally, what was that? Sally Jesse Raphael.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the 90s. And, kind of same situation, They maybe had a couple phone conversations with her after that, and then she just disappeared and didn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
And as, I look at it like this, I feel blessed that, even though my parents are divorced, and they have been since I was 12, they're still in my lives. Yeah. And they're still prominent,
Yeah. Same for me. I think I was 12 when they split, but...
And, I'm sure your adopted parents, did a good job and, are still in your life, if they're still alive.
Yeah, both of them. As a matter of fact, my mom would probably watch this too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shout out to Mom. She loaned me a bucket of money to get the truck now, because after the fiasco, I went through a fiasco with my truck breaking down, paying a whole bunch of money to a fucking place with a warranty that I should go and try to get my money back.
I remember that whole fiasco.
Yeah, so, I want to shout them out so bad and just, well, not shout them out, but drive the bus on top of them and leave it running. So, but just fuck them. Karma will get them.
You're talking about your biological parents.
Not the biological, the people that worked on my truck.
Oh, okay, sorry. You confused me for a second.
The biological parents, fuck them. I mean, they're medical students, whatever their excuse is.
You know what? Some people just should never reproduce it.
Yeah.
And have safer sex or whatever, because I look at it like this: if you're going to bring a person, a human being into this world, you need to be there for that person. And if you're not ready to have a child, I say have an abortion. So I'm sorry. Some people can agree with that or disagree with that, but if you're going to bring someone into this world, be there for that kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I met actual orphans that were adopted from an orphanage, And
Yeah.
I met, other people that have been adopted or foster home. I even had a foster brother growing up. A lot of people don't know that about me.
Wow.
Yeah. He was a classmate of mine in junior high. And then, I think his foster parents caught on to the fact that we realized that he was skimming, money, and not because we were buying him shoes and clothes and stuff. My mom felt bad. And then one day he shows up at our doorstep and then it's like, hey, can you take him? And I was like, what? So we, got a bunk bed and he became my foster brother for a couple years.
Wow,
And
cool.
and then he ended up moving to like a former foster family or whatever. And I'm still kind of in touch with him, but I mean, he was kind of a messed up kid too. You know what I mean?
It messes with you.
It fucks with your head.
Yeah.
And I learned that, early on, and then I was like so kind to him. Like I looked up to him as an actual brother, you know what I mean? We were same age and everything. And I was just like, my family's going to take you, under your wing. And we did for a little while. And then eventually, I don't know what the reasoning why he moved was or whatever, but, it was a long time ago.
There's certain things with the laws. My sister, just the one just below me, adopted. It's 7 kids. She did foster parenting for a while. Her and her husband for a while, but then she ended up adopting them. They were on. Okay, I can never remember her name, but so Will Smith is the one that slapped Chris Rock, right?
Yep.
Okay, his wife or whatever they are, his wife, right?
Jada Pinkett.
Okay, she has some show. Or did?
Yeah, I think so. Like,
So my sister and family were on her show, and then like on the cover of People magazine and all that, because she adopted them. And now that they're just part of the family. All these kids, they're 7 of it. Oh my God, if they even see this. So shout out, but. So she did that, and for me, I mean, my dad just contacted me not too long ago, and actually bitched at me because I don't keep in contact because I get so focused in on work and everything I'm doing.
Well, you got a lot going on.
I unfortunately
you
do.
got your own family too now.
Yeah, but the thing that I am extremely grateful because of all the things and just inner turmoil that I go through. Being a punk rocker, being an artist, being a redhead, not knowing my roots of why I'm the way that I am, but being raised since I was 3 months old with my parents, they did great. I'm not the easiest one to raise. I mean, I drive my wife up a wall. I'm an artist. I'm a true fucking artist. So at times I drive myself up a wall.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We're human, man. We all have our fucking moments.
God, do I ever. And a lot of, the early days, especially SOMA and all that, a lot of it was fueled by alcohol. So
yeah.
I've done a number on myself over the years, and I've always found myself trying to find my place where I fit in, and I find where I can fit in, but I still kind of on eggshells, because my mind creatively, it just does not stop. I have to create like constantly. That's why I do all these different music projects. The podcast, I will question up to that day of doing an interview whether or not we should continue doing it.
You mean the show?
Yeah. Whether or not anyone listens to it. Whether or not I should even be talking about anything that I did, whether or not it's even relevant. But then I meet other people like you and so many people that have their own stories from SOMA and from that time and how they've grown, and that's made them part of who they are.
Well, people love the show. It's inspirational, and I mean, we love that era of our lives, as SOMA kids. And, that goes back to, again, why I wanted to bring you on the show, because, you talk a lot about your life here and there, but I wanted to do more of a deeper dive, and I want to understand, like, who Jerm Addams is, and and how you got into skateboarding and how you ended up at SOMA. I mean, we know a little bit about that, and we know why you left.
Yeah.
But I'm stoked that you found a successor, being Jerry. I don't know if you were how he ended up at SOMA exactly.
That's,
you guys have kind of talked about that on the episodes, of your show. But
he I would say from my side of the story, there was a lot of people who did cleanup in the lots, worked in other ways under me, essentially being paid by Len. Some people being strictly paid by me out of my pocket at times, but you would get, into shows for free or whatever. But he was one, I don't remember exactly how he got brought in, but he basically, at the end for me, he was able to hold down what he was doing and was consistent. One of the things, I don't have a military background.
He's
my
so
dad
disciplined.
He is very, and I always figured that was from his military background, but it's just part of his character. That's why he's so good at, doing tour manager for Buck 09 and stuff.
He's professional, well reserved, like I said, disciplined, and doesn't take any bullshit either.
Right.
He's very straightforward and blunt, and he'll tell you what's up.
Yeah.
And
all those make really good for, he was in the front. Again, it was just one of those where we all just kind of fell into our place at the club, but he fell in and was able to assess and direct things in a way, again, it's with that pride of, we're all in the moment. So you bring up about, he's out in the front, the end of the show, there's kids left out. I'm finishing everything up in the back. The lots are all clean. I've got all that organized. Everyone's going home. I'm getting ready to lock up. Jerm, there's a couple kids out front. Oh, well then fuck, we ain't going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. But he's the one that initiates that he's out there. He's helping me close down the club so I can lock up and get us the fuck out of there. But there's kids, so then, do you have a ride? Yeah, well, do you need to use a phone? What's going on? And then, coordinating that. So he took the initiative to make sure that things were getting done. And then eventually, when I was on my way out, as Len's like, give me your whole life's work for the last 9 years. And I'm like, it'll be a dark day in hell before you get all my fucking shit. And if Len, for whatever reason, sees this, fuck you, dude. Those were my numbers. I gave him a lot of the numbers. I gave him, a bunch of information, but there's shit that's personal. They were friends of mine.
Yeah.
There's people who are not going to fucking play for him. And with me leaving, and with all the rumor mills starting of why I'm leaving, again, fuck you for that. Jerry just stepped up to the plate and started to fill that void.
Yeah.
I can't speak with, for him on more than that, but yeah, he understood. In my opinion, I think he just understood what we were trying to do, had the passion, and that's why he and Scott Raynor did open up the latest one.
Yeah.
It's a passion thing. I mean, if you're really passionate about anything, a relationship, to quitting a bad habit, if you're really passionate about it and you ride off of that, you can move mountains, and that's where I came in. I saw a need for a place for local bands to play. I was in there. I could do this. I figured out a formula. I somehow would be surrounded by the right people to help me do it, and then we just did it. But again, it's to pat anyone on their back for what the scene did is kind of immature thinking in a way, because if it wasn't for all the bands, if it wasn't for people like you, everyone supporting and also having their own dreams and aspirations to be part of what we were doing, then each little step wouldn't have been taken, because it took everybody to
Well,
create
it's
what we
not just
did.
a booking agent. It's a group effort. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many times I've been in debates with other bands, and I started a ripple effect on social media once. When I had my studio, I would do Icon Sound Presents, and I booked my clients' shows. And I did one at Brick by Brick, and there were 20 people out of 4 bands that I booked that showed up. And I was like, I was so frustrated. I went home and I posted, I can't believe, I book a show with my clients and only 20 people show up. That again confirms why the San Diego music scene is fucked up, right? That's all I said. And I have never had that many comments. I pissed off pretty much everybody. In fact, Tim Piles called me out on loudspeaker about it. Well, shortly after when he had me on there, he said, "Oh, I've never seen anyone do something like that before." And I was like, "What's wrong with speaking my mind? Isn't that what social media was created for?" I was like, "What did I say that was so offensive?" It's the truth.
Right.
And I had people arguing against how it's our job to supply the people there. And I was like, and this is some hipster telling me this, right? And he's like, "Wow, you're really good at taking criticism," because we're exchanging comments back and forth. And I was like, well, you're so used to playing at places like 7 Grand and bars where they have built-in crowds and walk-in numbers. People just show up because they're more bars. I'm talking about music venues where you go there for one reason, to see whoever's playing. I was like, I've seen slow nights at Casbah. I've seen slow nights at, Soda Bar, other places, because people are there to go see who's playing. So you can't put all that pressure on my shoulders as the booking agent, as the promoter, to do all the legwork for you. I've had bands in the past come up to me and be like, yeah, I'm here to, collect the money I made tonight. I was like, well, you didn't draw anybody.
Yeah.
What justification do you have when we didn't have a set guarantee, a set deal prior in advance, and the deal was you make what comes off the door, and I'm doing a tally of who's here to see who. I always did a tally because I felt like that was the most efficient way to pay a local band.
Yeah.
Just like, someone didn't pay shit. I mean, it was like $1 a head.
Yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, but, when you charge you $5, like, what does it fucking matter anyways?
Yeah, when you need an overhead of 100 people to pay the staff and to pay the bills.
And at least when I was charging $5, I'd give the bands $2 and the house would take $3. You know what I mean? Because, doing a 250 split doesn't really equal out right.
Yeah.
Because I thought about just doing 50-50. But anyways, I don't know what my whole point was here.
Well, the point about being the scene is, that's the thing that I see nowadays is people get lazy. They'll go on social media and just post a couple things, and then if no one shows up at the show, they're like, well, fuck, no one was there, and then they start pointing the finger. But there's someone
because
about...
these bands don't know how to take accountability. I'm on both sides. I was called a politician. I was called a sellout. That's where Authentic Sellout, my band's name, came to be. Because, some people thought I was just a greedy promoter like everybody else, or just didn't like the fact that I became a promoter, when all I'm trying to be is an ally. I was like, you know what? Most promoters, most booking agents aren't even musicians, or they're failed, bitter-ass musicians. And, whether my band takes off or it doesn't, like, I'm still going to put myself out there. Shit, I'm still doing it 17 years later, with Authentic Sellout. We're not as active as we used to, but when I'm not ready to drop the mic and finally, call it a day. But I'm having a good time, and we do this for the pure love of music, period. I'm not in this to point fingers. Even if you're not drawing, I'm going to let you know, like, hey, I'm sorry you didn't draw anybody, but you got to look at this from a business perspective. We have operating expenses every time we flip the light switches on in here and power up that PA system. We have a bar staff, we have drinks to sell, we have bills to pay. You guys don't think about those things. We don't have walk-up traffic in an area like Brick by Brick. We're in a weird industrial zone. It's a destination venue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it's interesting when it's all about how you approach somebody too. Like I've had moments where I'm sure you have too, where you've been pissed off and kind of lost it on a band or whatever before. But
Yeah,
I've also had moments where I've been, very calm and collective and just broken it down to them in a simplistic manner. This is just the reality of how it is. Put yourself in my shoes for change. I mean, I feel like people, especially more than ever in this day and age, don't do that. And they don't, extend a lending helping hand. A lot of bands are just like this, expecting to get paid just because.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't you know who I am? Theory. That's the.
I mean, look. I'm so worried about this generation because look at the era we're in. I read this article the other day, and I just want to say this real quick because it made me think of this. This 13-year-old girl, and I think it was Northern California, gets jumped by some random girl, who just looked at her wrong. They didn't know each other.
Yeah.
At a McDonald's. And then kids around and even adults picked up their cell phones and recorded it. And, kids were taunting it or whatever. And the whole report was like, why is it that nobody did anything to help out? You guys, That's the era we're in,
Right.
We'd rather pick up our cell phones and film a fight going on rather than break it up. Or if there's an accident, somebody's injured and hurt, you have to film it first. And most of the time, no one's going to do anything.
To get more likes and views on your social media.
That's what I'm saying. I was raised by a mother who worked in the ICU as a nurse. And, when we go on vacation as a little kid, EMTs, weren't there when an accident happened. This happened a couple times. She'd pull over and, go right in, spring right into action. When that jet crashed in University City, she was at home and it was like right up the street, first person on the scene. She said the media tried to interview her and she's like, nah, I do this for a living. I don't need any, gratification, publicity for it.
Trying to build the story.
Yeah, this is what I do. I just like to help people. And that's the kind of upbringing I have and the mentality I have. So going into the music scene, and you're the same way, and that's why we, when we first met, and I remember the first time we talked on the phone, we were so stoked off that conversation because we come from the same class, you know what I mean? Our mindset is just we love music and we love helping people and we love, the whole scene and we just want to unite it and bring it together. I was never in this to compete, who's cooler and then who, and, it's not about sitting at that fucking cool table or being in that cliquey little scene because we all know there's all the different cliques, especially here in San Diego. It's weird, but we want people to be entertained and have a good time because that's what brings us pure satisfaction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is watching that around us. And, you played a real pivotal part in the scene. You're such a giving and good, genuine person. I admire what you did with Red Rums Skates. We haven't talked about that, either. I don't know how long you've been doing the skateboard company for, how you got into that. So
2007.
Talk a little bit about that.
That came up because for whatever reason, I ended up getting a deck. I think it was through the liquor store. There was one of those giveaways, and I seen the deck, and it kept eyeballing. I'm like, what's up with that? And, well, it's a giveaway, blah, blah, blah. And I said, cool. How can I get it? So I worked out a deal and bought, I used to go there and get a case of wine from them. So for whatever reason, I ended up getting it, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just paint on this. And so that was in 2007. I started painting on skateboards again. But it was more of, and during that time, I don't remember where the board is. I should have kept that first one. Maybe I do have it somewhere. But so I painted it, and then I just put Red Rum, and then because of Dogtown Skates, instead of Skateboard Company, I put Skates. And originally it was just one word. But then when I went on social media in 2012 is when I seen there was another company called Red Rums Skateboard Company. And they're mostly like shirts and merch and stuff. And I'm like, all right, well, because I was doing the whole license and everything. And you can license in California, and this was in Ohio. And I've had a lot of inner battles. It's just not even worth talking about at this point. But so I changed it to Red Rums Skates, and I licensed up and went social media in 2012.
Okay.
So the idea and the reason why it was pushed so much is V, my wife, had told me, she's like, you know, because I have canvases everywhere. I have closets full of canvases. Because, you know, paint, I've been an artist my whole life basically as well. And she just goes, well, just make it a company because you can paint on the skateboards and then you can sell them. So I was like, all right, yeah. So by 2012, when I was really ramping it up, I found a really good wholesaler. We had to test them out. So V wrote them, I wrote them, found really good quality. You know, because we're not gonna, I don't want to sell something that I can't ride. So we did that and found a place, and then we started to expand. We did a lot of things with the company and ruffled a lot of feathers too with pricing, just all sorts of, even when I started making them myself, pressing them and shaping them. There's, just like in music and anything else, there's a lot of people that as soon as you get a little bit of success, they want to tear you down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, 850, 860 or so decks later, you know, I'm still kind of doing it, but it's more like I got one at home that I'm working on. It's more commission type stuff. I don't want to compete in the business of skateboarding because there's, again, like anything, there's so many different people doing skateboard companies that we basically at this point become kind of a legacy brand. And the whole concept behind it was just Halloween stuff and using my art because, you know, I use bright colors and you know that. And because of the fact that V and I rode and still ride skateboards, it just kind of everything fit in. Even our daughter, you know, Severina rides, but she rides her longboard mostly. And but with that company, I did a pro model for one guy who rode for us very shortly, and then he dropped out. He wanted to become an actor, and met a lot of cool people along the way. Sponsored a lot of people, and at the beginning of COVID, when that whole thing started, is when I decided I have to do something. Because, you know, I got stacks. You see my museum.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something to give back because I don't like the business side of doing business in the skateboard business. Again, there's so many people with preconceived ideas and attitudes. So then that's when I started Skateboards for Kids. And as you know, I would get the same quality decks. I would hand paint them. I had a few donations that had came in to help launch it, but a lot of it was just money out of my pocket, and I was just putting together completes and then just giving away to kids to give them that opportunity of having something. Like I always had my skateboard, so I was new. I had something grounding.
Yeah. You
know, it was my music, a skateboard, and again, you know, the art. So that's where that whole concept came from. And then last Christmas, when I donated all those for your charity, which was amazing, that was the last batch of it, and I just had to let it die. I wasn't getting any outside help. Promises and social media likes and hearts and all that, they don't pay the bills. And there's Boogie's chasing your cat over there. So unfortunately I had to let that die, but realistically at this point it's kind of for the better, because as I am getting older, you know, I'm turning 55. We got the podcast going. It's going really well. It's a lot of fun. I've got the left outs that I'm doing. Now I'm going to be doing the vocals as well as playing bass. I do have another project that's kind of, I just have to record some bass tracks, and we'll see if we do something. It's it's either going to be called Cementerio, which was a project I was trying to start, or it might be 3000 HC for 3000 hertz. But that's kind of an industrial type project. And other than that, I just kind of singly focused down to the left outs, riding my skateboard as much as I possibly can. And of course, my landscaping, which now I'm doing minimum of 6 days a week. And that's something I started doing when I was 18, when I moved out to Santee. That's the first real job. And then after that, I ended up at Wiener Schnitzel. But I love pushing a mower. I put an earbud in, I listen to podcasts, I listen to music. And it's my zen zone. It's just, I love doing it. And so basically, and the funny thing is when I turned 50, Via said to me, well, you should just try to find the things that you really enjoy doing out of life and try to simplify. So by simplifying, that exploded into all these other projects, but now I'm back to trying to simplify things again. And I gotta be honest, sharing the stories of SOMA and still being back in it and looking forward to actually being on the stage again, but still writing music, I'm pretty freaking lucky, to be a punk rocker, gone through the shit that I've gone through, and to still being able to reinvent myself and keep myself occupied and creative. And it's pretty crazy when I really think about it. So I try not to think about it because it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about,
And then of course we got Boogie, who's AKA, Pugsley, AKA Boogie.
Yep.
And
we got Mimi sleeping in her bed over there.
Yeah, she's crashed hard. But it's interesting. And to watch as technology and all these things changed, it's a bizarre world. I mean, I don't expect everyone to do the things the way that I did, and technology helps a lot of things. But I'm still the type of guy, if your car has a tape player, I can relate.
Right? Yeah.
If you don't have a computer in your car, which was the last thing in my old truck that was going to need to be replaced, so another few $1,000s later. Again, like I said, my mom loaned me a whole bunch of money so I can get my 4Runner, keep me working. So, yeah, and I'm pretty lucky in that sense. And I got a dad that's like giving me crap because I'm not keeping in contact. So, yeah, I think it's worked out pretty good. And being a stepdad as well, we didn't talk about this, but there's been a lot of kids from relationships and just other kids that I adopted on, just like with the skateboard company, that become a father figure for.
Right.
Which is crazy to even be in that position because of who I am, but there's a place for every punk rocker out there.
I like that. That should be a shirt. That's true, man.
So I am a bit set in my ways, but
who is?
I know.
Let's be real.
I mean, you see my house, a freaking haunted house. It's every day is Halloween.
Yeah. It's tucked away, like Tim said on his episode. He's passed by it a million times and never realized that someone actually lives there. Yeah. Whatever he said. But yeah. I mean,
it's funny.
It's easy to pass by it too because it's right there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of dark too. You know? But it's a rad setup, and I mean you have amazing feng shui in there.
Thank you.
It looks like a skateboard museum. Yeah. Your little, den living room area is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love coming over there and hanging out. You know what I mean? And
it's just spooky enough.
Yeah,
huh?
it is. It is. And I still have that giant coffin if you need something for the backyard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
That I need to get rid of. My mom keeps giving me crap about that because it's in her garage, and I think she's a little creeped out by it.
Yeah. That's a funny thing too, is like when I explain to people about the coffins, but then there's other people, like I had some friends over not too long ago that were in town, and yeah, it was Kayleen and Mike, and she had asked about, well, where's the coffin? Because I just had that little one that I made, and I go, oh, that one's right over here, and it's the one with all of the Felix the Cat collection, and it's now a shelving unit. And she goes, oh yeah. I go, but I still have the other one that's upstairs, and then we actually have two that are in the front that you probably didn't notice because they're, one's a vegetable garden, and the other one just has some succulents in it. But it's just all. If you think about it in the pretense of this is a haunted house, he's got a bunch of coffins and crap, and you're like, what the fuck? This guy is a nut. But then when you look at it the way that we have it, it's just because I paint with bright colors.
It's art.
Actually, yeah.
You're an artist. I get it. Like average person doesn't think the way we do.
Yeah.
We're the type of people that don't color inside the lines.
Yeah.
But I always look at things from the outside perspective. I always make a
Come here, boo.
like spiritual reference that I'm like the black wolf. I'm not in any kind of pack. I'm the lone wolf, but I step in when it's necessary.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how I am in that sense.
Oh.
Yeah.
It looks like someone's getting a bit restless.
Yeah, we should probably wrap things up. But before we do, I always like to have my guests give some kind of affirmation or quote or way they live their life, kind of just, some mindful advice for anyone that maybe wants to become a promoter or an artist or do something creative or something that's meaningful to you that you think, would be great to share with others.
It's kind of loaded because there's so many things. I would say the most important thing realistically for and coming from my perspective, just if you're passionate about anything, realistic, if you're really passionate about someone, it could be another person, it could be an art form, it could be whatever it is, go in 100%. Don't fake it. Go for it. Because the things you don't try to do in life are the things you're going to regret. If something doesn't work out, at least give it, 110%. No, just fucking do it. Own it. Win it. And if it doesn't happen, it's fine. Because, nothing lasts forever. We don't last forever. So just do the best you can. But, don't fake it. I kind of faked it to make it. But, full.
I wouldn't say that.
100%. I still to this day, yeah, there's so many days and there's so many people and there's so many stories to tell that it won't be done in my lifetime. But the good thing is other people are sharing, other documentaries are being done. And we all, we have our families and our friends and we can all share, and we have these formats like your podcast. Me even being able to talk about me is it's really cool because I get to kind of purge some of these things.
Yeah.
And to be able to share, hopefully it'll inspire someone. But yeah, just go on 100% and no regrets. Just do it.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it from the man himself. And Jerm, dude, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Having you on this show and getting, I don't know, if you've done interviews before.
Yeah.
But for me personally, it's great to hear you share your story and learn a little bit more about you. Yeah. And do that kind of deep dive.
Yeah. We've never done that out of.
Yeah, because I want this show to be kind of fun and therapeutic at the same time for the guest. So,
no, this is great. It's a great atmosphere, and I'm glad to be able to do it with you. I haven't done any in a while, and this is a lot more fun because it's in person and not on Zoom.
Yeah, I like to do them when I can in person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have technology like Zoom to be able to do the, different types of interviews and whatnot.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having Mr. Pugsley here.
Of course, and Mimi has a new friend, except, she's a little tuckered out right now. But
She's like, he's too young, too rambunctious.
I mean, he's an old lady. She's 18. Yeah.
All right, brother.
All right, man. Well, that wraps up another episode of The King's Couch.
Thank you, guys.
I'm your host, Sulo King, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.